Welcome to Wisdom on the Front Porch. Subscribe, ring the bell, like, and share the wisdom. Pull up a chair and join us with today's guest.
Welcome to another great episode of Wisdom on the Front Porch. But today we're combining Wisdom on the Front Porch with reading between the words, because we're going to hear about Joseph Bolton and his author journey, which is quite a journey in itself. So sit back, relax. Make sure you've pulled up the chair. We always have an empty chair for you on this front porch, and let's get started. So Joseph, I know you have 3 children's books. A 4th one is coming out. So kind of give us their titles, and then I want to ask you a different question.
Okay. So first I want to kind of explain that they're not really children's books.
Okay.
They're not written for children. They're written for a general audience, but they're written in a way that adults can definitely enjoy. In fact, most adults are the primary audience of these books. So even though they're illustrated, they're not little kids' books. They're not
That's
written in that
awesome.
stone.
I'm glad to hear that. My book,
Yes.
Baxter's Heart, I have to show everybody. If you're looking at this as a video, here's the book, Baxter's Heart. Look, that's a different one, Baxter's Heart. And it is. I understand what you're saying. Even though it may look like a children's book and illustrated, it is for others. And we need more books like that, books that really get into the heart. So tell me, how did you come? Have you always written I'll say illustrated books. We'll just leave it at that. Have you always written illustrated books?
No. I mean, I wrote 2 books earlier than this that kind of were predecessors to the one that I'm doing right now. So the books I'm working on right now is a series my main focus on is called Old Grandmother's Tree. And it's a retelling of my Algonquin ancestor, Rimete Wiawagwe, and her very remarkable life in Quebec in the 17th century, and as well as her descendants who were Quebecois and Algonquin in Quebec, all leading up to me. And we talked about how this book was very illustrated, maybe kids' book. Well, it is very illustrated. So of the 3 books, there's actually, I think, about almost 60,000 words of text, 14 separate stories that are all interrelated in the same story universe, and fully illustrated to the point where it's almost 1 illustration per page.
Wow.
So it's not quite a graphic novel, but the illustrations are very rich, colorful, a very dimensionality to them that Natasha put together. So it's actually a very unusual product. It looks like a kid's book. It's not exactly marketed as a kid's book.
Right.
It's almost like a graphic novel, but the illustrations have a much deeper context and textual tone to them than a graphic novel does. So it's a very unusual book.
Right.
And the process of creating.
Stop you right there.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I need to, because I think some people who aren't familiar with writing illustrated books, the thing of it is your illustrations can be absolutely fantastic, but they have to tell the story. So a really great author and a really great illustrator, an author tells the story, but an illustrator also tells the story. And when you bring them together, they enhance each other like crazy. So if someone can only see the pictures, they're going to understand the story. If somebody only reads the words, they're going to understand the story. And when you bring them together and they tell the story together, they enhance each other. That is just amazing. So I love that you have 60,000 words in 3 books, but you almost have an illustration on every single page to go along with it. So the reader who doesn't really care that much for illustration is not going to get bored because they've got all the words to read. The ones who loves to read, but they need some more stimulation, are going to love it because they've got the pictures to go with the illustrations. So I love the story about your grandmother. Why did you choose her out of everybody and everything you could have written about? Why did you choose to write about your grandmother?
Well, when I researched my family tree, my mother's side, my mother's family all came from Quebec a couple of generations back. And through research on Ancestry.com, Genie.com, and also giving my mother and her siblings a DNA test, I was able to build a picture of her family history in Quebec. And that family history included mostly French, but also some Native American, I call gateway ancestors. And there were four. And of those four, probably the one I think whose story was most interesting to me and inspiring was this Algonquin woman named Mrimete Wiawagwe. And her story begins in 1652. She's 22 years old. She's living in Quebec, married to another Algonquin, and they have two small children. And the Mohawks come up from New York, raid her village, and her husband was killed.
Oh,
And the Mohawks took her two small children. She never saw them again or even figured out what happened to them.
wow.
And then 5 years later, she married a French settler named Pierre Cauque, and her and Pierre became my ancestors, my ninth great grandmother. And at the end of her life, the priest at Trois-Rivières, her parish priest, wrote of her just after she died. And he said, I quote, Mrimete Wiawagwe lived a full life with dignity, respect, and love, a courageous and loving Algonquin woman. And he certainly did not have to write that. All he had to do was just annotate that she passed away. So between all that, you can see that there's a very dramatic story. How do you go from barely out of your teens, losing your family, but at the end of your life, to be held in such high regard in both communities, French and Algonquin? So she is the old grandmother of the old grandmother's tree. And I call it Old Grandmother's Tree because it's her family tree. So the book follows her and then on to her great, great, great grandchildren and so on, generation of generation. And there's every generation, there's somebody who has Mrimete Wiawagwe's magic shawl that she was given to her as a wedding present. It has the colors of the Northern Lights. It's kind of magical. But
Wow.
that shawl being passed down from generation to generation is the symbol of that connectedness we have between generations. Excuse me.
Oh, I get it. No, that's
Mhm.
wonderful. You know, I did almost 50 years. Well, I haven't really done much the last few years, but at least 40 plus years of genealogy for my ancestors. Now, some of it what started it was when my grandmother passed away, and the kids were told to go through the trunks, sort it all out, take care of everything, sort everything pretty much from the house. But in those trunks, we found letters and documents from the 1600s. I mean, it was just incredible
Wow.
what we found. And so, yeah, I get finding this rich history. For some people, they can't do that. It's amazing that we go on through life and there's maybe one ancestor that if anything happened to that ancestor, nobody else would be there.
Mhm.
I have a grandfather, third, second. Yeah, it would have been my, oh, I think my great grandfather, but he was in the Civil War and he only had one child.
Mm,
And if he had been killed in the Civil War, the rest of us wouldn't be here.
right, right,
And
yes.
it's amazing like that. Also, documents get burned, they get eaten by rodents, they get damaged by water or moisture, they get
Mhm.
lost, they get donated somewhere, and you may never know where they are. My grandfather's second cousin, older than him, wrote to each of the relatives to let them know their family history. Now, if she hadn't have done that, most of these families would not know this rich
Right.
history they come from. So it's good to pass those stories down. And I love that that's what you are doing with this book. You're
Mm,
passing stories down, but I'm going to guess here, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, please do. But these are stories that can affect every family, that everyone can learn from. Is that correct?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now there are people who you talk about having notable ancestors. It's not unheard of for authors to write, if they have like an interesting ancestor, maybe a historical person, that they'll write a historical novel about
Right.
that ancestor. It's a very common thing for people to do.
Right. Yeah,
This
I'm in the
book is,
process
yeah,
of doing something like that right now. But I'm actually writing stories. They're just going to be short stories about my ancestors and their role in creating this nation we have. Here it is, our 250th
Right.
anniversary in the US or birthday, whichever way you want to look at it. So someone said, why don't you put your stories in a book? I go, well, I've got them in a book. I've got them in this college textbook. And no, they said, write it like a story. Just give short stories. They don't have to be long. And it's like, well, I don't know, I can do that. Something new. So I'm giving it a try, got to try new.
Yes.
So go ahead.
But my books are different
Okay.
because I didn't try to recreate exactly what happened in the sense from a historical point of view. I retold her story, Rimete Wiawagwe's story, and her other descendants, my ancestors, other ancestors. But I retold it in a reimagined old Quebec that is in the style of a folktale and folklore. So you have magic, which illustrations lend themselves very well to portray that. So you have magic, you have ancient trickster animal characters based on Native American folklore. And all the stories, I say they're folktales, so it gives you the impression that these are retelling of old stories. They're not. All these stories in this book are original, written by me, but they're told in that style of a folktale. So when you read it, it'll feel familiar to you because it has that folktale kind of elements, like trickster animal characters. Trickster characters are ubiquitous in mythology.
Yes.
And I use the folktale as a narrative language, because it's universal. Every culture has folktales. So you read it and it's familiar, and there are like lessons in there, but I don't hit you over the head with them.
Right.
They're subtle, and they come out naturally from the story. They're not forced.
That's wonderful.
And so that's another way why these books are very different and very unusual. There's nothing else really like them, I don't think. So it's a historical novel, historical fiction, collection of original short stories about real historical people, but set in a reimagined magical world of old Quebec.
Okay, so I see behind you, for those who are listening to this, behind Joseph, there is this beautiful illustration. There's like this fire, but this northern lights coming out of it. You see a bird. There's a bear standing that has a necklace on. There's a moose that has a necklace. There's a fox that has a necklace. Does the turtle have a necklace too?
Yes, he does.
There's a raccoon. You see a person.
Yes.
And then in the fire, there's kind of like it's a person, but not really. Kind of like
It is a person. It is a person, actually.
Okay.
It is actually the spirit of Rimete Wiawagwe's first husband. So in the story, when I rewrote it, on her wedding night, which takes place 5 years after the attack, she wants to marry Pierre, but she's still grieving. She's grieving for her children. She's grieving for her first husband. And there's a little bit of guilt about marrying again. Just a little bit. There's a hint of it. So on her wedding night, Rimete Wiawagwe wakes up early in the morning before the sun rises. She goes out, looks at the stars as she did when she was a child. And in there, she meets the trickster animal characters that you see, the moose, the bear, and the raccoon, and the turtle, and so forth, and the fox. She meets them there, and who shows up but the spirit of her first husband. And that's the glowing man you kind of see. It looks like a fire.
Right.
And he tells her that, first of all, says, don't apologize for marrying. I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm dead. I'm happy that you are not alone, and Pierre is a good man and he loves you.
Oh, wow.
So, and that kind of reassures her and helps her to move on.
Yeah.
And so that's that scene, and that is actually the cover of the first volume, Old Grandmother's Tree, Volume 1.
That is awesome. Yeah, we all need that reassurance sometimes that what we're doing, even though we may have guilt, and there's no reason to feel guilt, but we do, because there's that attachment, there's that love that's there, and it's like, am I throwing away that love by going, getting married a second time, or doing this again, or whatever? And so this could. Yeah, this would be good for a lot of people. I see why it's not a children's book. It can still be read by children or read to children, but it's not specifically just written
No,
for 4 to 6 year olds, type.
no. I have one funny story to tell you about that. So the very first
Okay.
story I wrote in this collection um, was called La Trope de Sabot, and in it, my great grandmother she's living on her farm in 1902 Quebec, and at midnight, the farm animals decide that under the moonlight, it's a beautiful night. They sneak out of the barn, grab the toboggan, and go sliding down the hill. Excuse me. And so after they do one sliding down the hill, they're on the hill having a little celebration and they're smoking cigars and they're drinking wine. So I have an illustration with a sheep drinking wine and a pig in a little coat and a monocle smoking a cigar. And they're just, very happy about this. And of course, my great grandmother comes up, she chastises the animals, but at the end, she gets on the toboggan and goes down the hill.
Fun.
And she's wearing old grandmother's Marie Wagwe's shawl in all the stories. So that's how it's connected.
Nice.
So it shows that she's a descendant and she's continuing on and the magic lives on. But so early on, when I showed that story to the editor team I was working with in Montreal, he looked at it and said, "You can't do this. This is a children's book. You can't have animals drinking alcohol and smoking cigars." And I said, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm going to do that. You bet I'm going to put that in there. I'm not marketing it for little kids. This is not a baby book."
Right.
So I made it very clear to my editorial team that, I'm going to write what I think it needs to be written and said. And that's the way it is. My job is just to make sure whatever I write it well and
Correct.
work with my two illustrators to create these beautiful illustrations that will complement the story, as you said earlier.
Right. And I'd like to talk about that journey a little bit. Working with an editor, finding an editor, helping somebody get your book published, finding the illustrators, because you
Mhm.
mentioned a couple of times that you have someone else who illustrated these. You didn't do it for yourself. But before I do that, have you written books throughout your whole life?
No, when I was a teenager, I had a nice little collection of romantic poetry that I wrote,
Oh,
into my college. I've never been able to really replicate that. Um, I have written a romantic story though since then.
oh,
But
cool.
anyway, so I did that in college, high school. Then I was in the army for many years. I didn't write. And then when my brother died in 2013 of ALS, it was such a traumatic experience for my family and myself that I started doing writing on a blog, mostly essays just about science, math, philosophy, history, whatever I wanted to write about, and family history. And I did it for myself. I was happy that sometimes some blog posts got picked up nationally, and I was very happy with that.
Thanks.
But I did it for myself. And then towards the end of when I was active with that, wrote my first collection, short story, fiction short story, and it was based on Greek mythology. And then after that, I started taking French to learn more about my French Canadian heritage. And I discovered the story of Wagwe. And I started to be inspired to keep writing this fiction, but do it based on her and her life.
Yes.
And working with and I always thought it had to be illustrated because that's my writing. Every author has a different process. Mine is very visual. So before a story actually gets put down into the keyboard, I envision the story. It's like a movie in my mind. It plays over and over and over again until it's just ready to go on the damn burst. And I sit in front of the keyboard, no matter what time of the day or the night it is, and how long it takes, I get that first draft out. Of course, we always think our first draft is perfect as authors, but of course it isn't. So that just begins the process. And then if you would like, I could talk about how working with the artist, that part of this.
I would love to hear about that because I think that's really important. Um, if you're going to have any kind of illustrations in your book, even if it's just the cover, you are working with an artist. Whether they use pen and paper or they use AI, you still have to approve. And so let's hear what it was like working with illustrators for you.
Okay. Well, because this project was so big, and as of right now, I think we have 700 completed illustrations. The fourth
Wow.
book has another 135, 140 illustrations to do. So it's a giant process, an enormous process. So I use two artists because
Okay.
it's artist team. And the first artist is a young woman named Masami Kiyono. She's in Manhattan and she's a storyboard artist. She storyboards commercials. Perfect for the job. So she and I work together after I write the story, and we go through and we talk about where an illustration should go.
Okay.
And she does a rough sketch. So we plan the basic illustration concepts together, Masami and I, and we do that all through the whole story.
That's amazing.
So while that is done, of course, the story is still being edited, the text is still being worked and tweaked a little bit.
Right.
So once that's done, then I hand it over to Natasha Pelley-Smith, who's my final artist. And she's a Paris-trained illustrator and mural creator. She's based out of Toronto. Very talented, beautiful artist. So we work together again. The process starts over. I show her the rough sketches, and she takes those and creates the final illustrations. And it's not her just filling in the coloring it in. She adds her own layer of creativity to the stories, her own layer of details. She has her own ideas how to interpret these illustrations as well. But throughout the process, I'm very much involved. From the creation of the rough sketches all the way to the final illustrations, I'm very much involved in that design process the whole time. So, and that's important because if you are going to work with an illustrator as an author, you can't just take the story and just throw it over the wall and say, okay, you do it and you show me what you got when you're done. It's not how it works. It has to be a collaborative process the whole time. But there's a real challenge here working on a project this big. And there's another reason why you don't see books like this. Because from an economic point of view, it becomes very difficult to manage. If you're dealing with a small illustrated book, a children's book with maybe 30 illustrations at the most, I'm just guessing, it may be typical. But so if you have to make some tweaks or something comes up, like where the artist has to go away make a break for a week because some of the project comes up, it's not a big deal, time wise. And, if you do a contract with your illustrator.
I have to disagree with you on that because with my Henrietta, the Hutto Hippo book, my illustrator got married, didn't tell me she was going to be gone. And I had a deadline. I had to have that book at a certain time. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not going to be available? So it was really stressful. It was wonderful working with her. But even with little projects, you have deadlines. You've got things to meet. People to get certain parts to. You've let everybody know this book is going to launch on this date. And especially if it's a children's book, you've got to have the illustrations. So yes, but I do understand that you have a huge project.
So multiply those problems.
Or 30 illustrations, but yeah, you have way more than that in this one.
So multiply the problems that you just mentioned about delays and things come up because life happens with your illustrator. They're still living life. They have other projects that they have to do to sustain a large enough income. So
Correct.
It becomes an accumulative effect and eventually it becomes like a grind. And so there were times that, especially working with Natasha, I had to be also a coach and an encouraging person, to keep that creativity going. So it didn't become a grind.
Right.
So it's very challenging to have an illustrator to commit to a project this size. Most illustrators will only want to do a 30 illustration book. That'll be it. They want to do a project and they want to set it aside and move on to the next one. They don't want a commitment for a year. So the fact that Natasha is willing to work with me now for a couple of years, and now we have a fourth book coming, I'm very fortunate, that she is willing to do this. And I think that's because she believes in this book as well. And I consider her the co-author of the book. That's why her name is on the front, right next to mine is she's listed as the illustrator, but it's her book as well. That's why I look at it. So it's
I love that you do that. I do the same thing with Baxter's Heart. Anna is wonderful. We've got 5 books that we're going to do together. So yeah, I totally get it. When you've got an illustrator who's going to stick with you, it's wonderful. In one of my books, I don't even have it out yet. I started it a year and a half ago. The illustrator just disappeared.
Mm.
And so now, and you can't just find another illustrator because you have to either start all over or you have to find someone who can do something similar, and you can't. Everybody has their own style. So the best thing is like, okay, books half done. Well, we have to start all over. And when you've
Yep.
already poured a lot into it, it's difficult to keep going. So yeah, I totally get that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what makes it difficult.
Yeah.
So there may not be a fifth book after this one. I have ideas, but I really have to see where things go. I have high hopes that once I complete the fourth book, there's enough material there for this to be easily translated into like a Netflix or Apple TV
Oh,
or some kind of
wonderful.
streaming service, because essentially it's already storyboarded for you, because you have those illustrations serve as a
Yes.
storyboard if you're going to create as a movie or a TV show. And because you have a collection of short stories, it becomes naturally episodic, that you can expand those stories out to make different episodes.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
wonderful.
one of my hopes I have for this book series as well.
Yeah. I remember going to a talk with a gentleman who wrote a book that was just, similar. It was really great. And now he says it's taken him 10 years to do the story so that it's set up for television and it can go in those separate parts. And he says it's really difficult. So I love that you're going after that you're going to keep going. You're going to keep seeing this vision grow and grow.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely keep us in the loop with it. I want to see how
Mm-hmm.
this works out. It's
Yes.
is wonderful because it's a process. So how did you go about finding your editor? I mean,
Well, the editor service I Googled, and I wanted somebody out of Canada because the book is
okay.
Canadian service. So I Googled, author editorial services, Montreal, Canada, and I
Oh,
got Axel Author Services. And the lead is a woman named Alexa Nazaro, and she's been working with me uh, for like 3 years on these book projects. And so I'm very
nice.
happy with her service. So she has helped me with comments of the stories, giving feedback on the concept of the stories themselves, and then final editorial with the grammar and punctuation and so on and so forth, cleaning that up. And also, she hired out a translator for me to translate the books into French.
Oh,
I do
nice.
know some
Oh,
French, but
wonderful.
I don't think I know enough to write in that.
Same here.
So we hired a
I can move
translator
around
out of,
town, but
yeah.
that's it.
So the translator is a graduate student out of McGill University in Montreal, and specializing in translation. So she was perfect for the job.
Oh,
So,
nice.
and then
Very
I had to
nice.
pay for that as well.
Yes.
That,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work to do that and to make sure that it's right. And you have to have a little bit of trust there because you don't know the language, but how to
Well, I can read
deal
it.
with that.
I can read it. And
Oh,
I
good.
actually, oh yeah. So it wasn't like I had it translated and just kind of took it on blind faith. I went through and read the story in French to make sure it was saying what I wanted it to say.
Oh, wonderful.
And I did make some corrections and changes to it. I
Okay.
even found grammatical errors. So I do know enough French that I could do that. I certainly could read my own books in French
Yes.
and understand exactly what's there on the page. So I was able to make those corrections. So it wasn't just throwing it over the wall and say, okay, translate it for me.
Yeah. You know what I love best about what you're saying is you stayed in the process the whole time. Now, are you publishing your books yourself or do you have a publisher?
No, I work with Amazon KDP,
Okay.
and Alexa and her team upload the books. We design them, upload them in there. And I think for a long time it was always the stigma about self-publishing. I don't think it's quite as bad as it used to
No,
be.
no.
Um, but I thought, well, do I go to a publisher? But you know what? I don't want to give up creative control of these books.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
and being tied to a publisher at the hip isn't always to your benefit. They don't necessarily see the book the same way with the same kind of love that you
Right,
do and putting the
right.
effort into marketing it. It may be just set aside and it's kind of trapped up in this cage, locked up until the contract with the publisher ends and you can take the book back. So I don't do that. I maintain creative control, and I've never had any second thought about that.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. It's really important because I've talked with authors who finally, after 2 or 3 years, when their contract has ended and they can get their book back, they've taken their book back and they've rewritten it, or they've corrected all the things that was taken out of the book, things that they felt were important, but for whatever reason, the publisher didn't want to do that. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing that on your own. And that may seem daunting to a lot of writers out there, or people who are starting to write. And my first, I thought you had to have a publisher. I didn't know about self-publishing. And so I went to a publisher, and it was a really different process. I did the same thing for my children's book, and there were things I would have liked to had, and I haven't changed it or anything yet, because it is good the way it is, but I think I will change it eventually and end up with I've got another series, and I've only done the first one on it because it was just different, and I was learning a lot about being a writer. Boy, I've learned a lot since that first book. But I'm glad that you do keep creative control. Now, there are publishers who will let you do that, and that's something you need to make sure you have written in your contract with them, in your agreement, that you maintain creative control and you get the final say on what goes and what doesn't go. And don't be bullied. This is your book, this is your baby, this
Right.
is your name on it, and that's the way it should be. So I'm glad you do all of that. So where do you see, well, I guess we talked about where you see it. You see it going into Netflix, onto television. You see it coming alive
Absolutely.
with animation.
Oh, I
And
do. Absolutely.
yeah,
I
that's
see it could be an
wonderful.
animated series. I think you could do CGI, live action CGI. I mean, I think if you look at the old Paddington movie that came out just a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
seamless, had
So,
CGI
so I have a
animal
question for
characters.
you. What's
Yes,
the difference between animation and CGI? I know someone's asking that.
computer generated imagery. And so use a computer to help create, like, especially like live action CGI. A lot of times most times will be live action mix. So
Okay.
you can create fantastic creatures, but it'll look like a real thing, not an
Okay.
animated. So it'll blend in with a live action film, for example, is a good way to use CGI.
Nice.
Animation be all
Nice.
animation. But I see either way. I think it could be done either way. I'd like to see CGI, actually live action CGI, because I like to see the idea of really human characters interacting with these CGI
Yeah.
trickster animal characters that I created in the book series.
Yeah, and there are a lot more shows coming out that are CGI. Right now, all I can think of is the Smurfs and then
Hmm
that blue guy that goes around running shoots out these spikes. I'm sorry, I can't think of his name.
Sonic Hedgehog, I think
Sonic,
maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Those two are the first ones that pop into my mind. But
hmm
CGI is used with a lot of things. So I imagine Jurassic Park CGI, is there never level up? I don't know. Maybe I should look into that.
I don't know. I really haven't done a lot of work yet. I do try to mention it every podcast I'm on because I believe this is ready. It only needs the right person to hear
Yes.
that this opportunity is there for them to
Oh,
create something
absolutely.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Um, yeah, that's wonderful. Um, so what do you do when you're not creating this book, or does this take up all of your time?
Um, I wouldn't say it takes up a lot of my time. I do a lot of podcasts. I think
Okay,
I'm up to almost 40 podcasts that I've been on as a guest.
nice,
So I can almost do
nice.
this in my sleep now.
All right.
um, but I was working for many years as a project manager for the Air Force as a contractor, and I've kind of retired at the beginning of October. It's kind of concentrated on the books, but now it looks like I actually may be going back. I think it's just too good of an opportunity to not to work, and I'm still relatively young. And
Nice.
besides, creating these books is resource intensive when it comes to money. I have to pay for the editorial services. I have to pay the illustrator. All that stuff takes money.
Yeah, the translator.
Translator takes money. It's
Yeah.
25 cents a word. So
Yeah.
multiply it out with 60,000 words, you can kind of get a sense how much was spent on this.
There you
So,
go.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to go back to work. Otherwise, I have my Army retirement, and I do a lot of skiing. I love to ski,
Nice.
downhill ski. I ski up in Quebec. I ski here up in Massachusetts and the New England area. And other than that, I hike in the summertime as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, for those that are viewing or listening to this, I did ask Joseph to come back to Reading Between the Words and talk about each book separately. And maybe we'll do all of them at once, and then he'll come back again when the other book is completed.
Mhm.
I really love what you've done. I want to hear, a lot of times authors will read just a little bit about, from their books, so we could get a little sneak peek into it. That would be fun.
Oh yeah, I would love to read an excerpt from the fourth book next
Oh,
time we have it,
wonderful.
if you want to do that sometime.
Yes,
Very
absolutely.
dramatic, very dramatic. So in the fourth book, just to let you know why I think it's going to be a very dramatic book, and again, it ties in what's not a kid's book. So in this story, the fourth book, Rimete Wiawagwe, a couple of days before she passes away, she recounts the story of the attack that her husband was killed in
Oh,
and the kidnapping of
wow.
her children.
Oh, I
And so
just
she
got goosebumps.
retells that story to her granddaughter.
Mm,
And it's a very emotional story.
yes.
And it can be kind of traumatic too, because children are taken and they're never heard from again. They're
Yeah,
gone. So, but it's also a very triumphal story at the end as well, and
that's
hopeful story.
wonderful.
But it's going to be very dramatic. I'd love to read a part of that if we
So
can.
I have a question for you on the genealogy side of it.
Yes.
So you've done the DNA test.
hmm
Have you found any relatives that are a match that you didn't know were related?
Oh, well, that's how I found Rimete Wiawagwe. I was actually did the DNA test. And so what showed up was that we had my mother and her siblings showed Native American ancestry, but we had no idea who they were. So it was that they were mysterious people at that time. And it took me 2.5 years to find them. But the very first one that I had a clue about was a gentleman who lived a couple hours away from where I'm at, emailed me and contacted me and said, we are a match on this DNA. And not only that, but people who are descendants of this Algonquin woman named Rimete Wiawagwe have this DNA marker. And it says, your mother has it. And so you must be a descendant of her. So that's how I got introduced to her story. And so I did
Oh,
the
that's
research and trying to
wonderful.
find it, but it took me 2 years to find that pathway
Yes.
from and it goes through from my mother to my mother's father, and then to his mother, his mother, his mother, his mother. No, her mother. Yeah, her mother, her mother, her mother. Only one man. So between my mother and Rimete Wagwe, there's only two men. Otherwise, they're all women all the way down.
Oh,
But
wow.
I found her, and I also found there was another gentleman who lived only an hour away from me in Rhode Island. His name was Norman Lavalle, and he loved Rimete Wiawagwe and did all this research. He collected all the original documents from the Jesuits about her life, and he had
Oh,
it on a web
wow.
page. So when researching her, I found his web page, and it was a wonderful resource. He had put so much work into it. But by the time I found him and learned about Rimete Wiawagwe, I learned that he had died only just a couple of months before that.
Oh,
So he had passed away. And worst of all, one of his children actually deleted his webpage.
oh no.
But fortunately, before that happened, I actually saved it as a PDF. So I would say 95% of his webpage I actually was able to save, and it's on my website now as a tribute to him.
Oh,
But
wonderful.
so you talk about records disappearing. So the information still would have been out there, wouldn't have been gone, but it would have been scattered and nobody
Oh,
would know where
yeah.
to find it.
Yeah.
So he collated all that information, the research records from the Jesuits, and created this picture of her. And that's why we know so much about her. due to Norman.
Wow.
And it came so close to being lost forever, all that work, because one of his children deleted it after he died. Why? It's not really clear to me why that happened. But
Maybe they
fortunately, I
just thought
did
it was
save
a
it.
thing to do. He's gone now, so we can close all of these out, without
Yeah.
realizing the value that they have right there.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
But,
I had you want to know how old my research is? When I had a website that had all my genealogy on it, when we moved, I had to get rid of that website because it was dial-up and it was on that server.
oh gosh,
And
dial
we
up.
were
Yeah.
moving out of state and I couldn't keep it. And
Hmm.
so, now it's nice. We can reach it anywhere that we live. But at
Right.
that time, it was like, well, if you're not going to live here, you don't have our services. You've got to buy our services and then pay for your site and all of this. And it's like, they just didn't do it then. So yeah, I've earned this gray hair.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's quite interesting. Yeah, maybe I should put my genealogy back up. I don't know. I've got it on
Mhm.
Ancestry. You can find me there.
Yes.
But oh, thank you so much, Joseph, for being here. How can people get a hold of you? Would you like
Oh,
people to get a hold of you and
oh,
your
absolutely. First off, visit my webpage, oldgrandmotherstree.com, written as one word.
okay?
And on there, you'll find my biography, the biography of Natasha. You'll find some sample illustrations. You'll have a summary of each book, as well as links to buy the books on Amazon, both in French and English, and as well as soft cover and hardcover. That we just started having the hardcover edition, which are really, really nice. And there's also a character Wikipedia.
Okay.
So if you're really curious about the books are about, if you read through the character Wikipedia, I think it'll definitely whet your appetite. Like, oh man, I want the story. I want to
That's
read about
awesome.
how they all connects together. So yes,
I
so
love
it's all
that.
in there.
I love that. Thank you so much for being on my show today. I definitely look forward to you being on reading between the words and we can get more in depth on each story itself.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. And thank you, our audience, for pulling up a chair and sitting on the front porch with us today. Remember, we've always got an empty seat for you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, my front porch friends and neighbors, for pulling up a chair with me and my guest today on Wisdom on the Front Porch. Now, if you've got value from this conversation, would you do me a favor? Leave a quick review, then share it with someone you know who could use some inspiration. It helps more friends find their seat on the porch. And hey, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what's next. Until then, keep the porch light on for new wisdom every time you show up. Your seat's always here for you on the porch.